Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for USA Basketball's Youth and Sport podcast. I'm Jay Demings. I'm the Youth and Sport Director here at USA Basketball. And I'm joined, as always, by 10-time gold medal winning coach and USA Basketball's Coach Development Director, Coach Don Showalter. Coach, I'm excited to continue our talk today on player development, and I know you are too.
Yeah, I guess it'll be really good for coaches to get some actionable items that they can use in practicing with their team for a lot of the different items that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And I know last episode, just to sort of update our listeners, we took a look at USA Basketball's 4 C's for player growth, and that's communication, comfort zone, choices, and the importance of competing. And we also discussed the coach's responsibility in this process. So we're looking to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that. So in this episode, we're going to give our coaches 4 essential behaviors that they can use to impart those 4 C's in both their teams and their players. And so these are going to be actionable items that you can use as a coach to impart the 4 C's. But the best part is we really feel that they're authentic. So, Coach, maybe just speak a little bit to why authenticity is important in the field of coaching.
Well, I think being authentic as a coach, first of all, develops a lot of trust between you and your players. If you're authentic and you come across that way with your drills and how you communicate, the players have more trust in what you're going to say and what you're going to do, and they kind of buy into your philosophy. And I think that's really important as a coach. So authenticity also comes from the fact that you as a coach will give them things that can make them better. And I think that's what everybody's trying to do, become better as a player. And so that helps with that aspect of it also.
Great. And, you know, what we like to try to do, and you and I talk about this a lot, is we like to give real, live, actionable items for coaches to be able to implement, things within their programs. And so we're today hoping to impart 4 actionable coaching behaviors that you all can use as listeners and as coaches at all levels. Because I know, Coach, a lot of the things we're going to go over today, you use with everybody from your high school teams to your junior national teams and within camps and things of that nature. So we're hoping to give 4 actionable items. Obviously, there are a lot more, but we'll focus on 4 today and things that you use, I know, within your teams. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think over the years, I wished I would have done these as a younger coach, because I think it would have made me a much better coach coming out of college if I had access to some of these things that we're going to do. So I think coaches will really enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. The first action, again, the purpose of these actions is to impart what we call the 4 C's within their players. So the importance of communication, getting players out of their comfort zone, making good choices, and competing. We call those the 4 C's. So the first action that we'd like to give you as coaches is what we call the communication circle. Coach, what is the communication circle?
Yeah, this is just how we end practice. I think it's really important to end practice on a positive note, so to speak. But what it is we just gather our team around in a circle. We hold hands, and then we talk a little bit about different items for the day. And so that's how we end the practice up. And I think what happens on this as well is that players get to see each other. They're looking across from each other. They're not. It's not a tiered approach where you have your good players ahead of your players that aren't so good. Everybody's on equal basis when you get in that circle.
Right. And so I've got this visual in my mind of the coaches in the circle, the players in the circle holding hands. I'm assuming you are outside the circle. I guess you could be in the middle of the circle too as a coach. But why do you do this? What's the importance of actually physically facing each other like that?
Yeah, sometimes you raise a good point, Jay. Sometimes the coaches are part of the circle as well, and sometimes we aren't. Sometimes we just want it to be a player-led circle as opposed to a coach-led circle. So at various times, depending on what we ask, is that the coaches are a part of it as well or not. The circle, it kind of creates a connection. I think it allows us to reflect on the practice and encourages players to contribute their thoughts, because every player will contribute to the circle itself, and it has nothing to do with the good players or the how good a player you are, or maybe how less skilled a player you are. Everybody contributes in a certain way on this.
Right. Okay. So, in practice, or literally to implement, what would you suggest? How do I go about this every day? Obviously, the first hurdle to pass, at least in my mind, would be getting players comfortable in starting, right? And then it becomes probably ingrained as part of your culture. But how do you actually implement this on a day to day?
Yeah. First of all, it's important that you do it on a daily basis, because I think it has more positive effect doing it every day as opposed to just once a week. Second thing is you really get in a circle and you hold hands. I mean, we're talking about maybe getting out of your comfort zone a little bit. We're teaching the players how to communicate with each other. So they're in a circle holding hands. I would say as a coach, I would say tell the player to your right what he did good in practice today, and we're very conscious of the fact that we tell them that they must look each other in the eye. They must say their first name. So the first player would turn to his right and say, for instance, Billy, I like the way that you really hustled today for loose basketballs on the court. And then Billy would turn to the next person, and we'd go around the circle that way. So again, it's a type of communication where you're teaching the players not only how to communicate, but you're leaving them with some real positive thing that their teammates saw them do in practice, which I think is really important as well.
Absolutely. One of the things I think, you talked about at the end of practice, so obviously a lot of the topics that you're going to discuss within that circle would be basketball related. Maybe just speak a little bit more to some of the off-court or the importance of some of the off-court topics that you could also implement within a communication circle, and maybe give some real-life examples of some of the things that you've heard in those circles, whether it be with your high school team, and I know you coach also your grandchildren's team, so I know you've coached 8-year-olds, for example, but also in the junior national team program, and maybe how when you start to get into some of those off-court topics, some of the things that are revealed.
Yeah, it's a great point, Jay, because this really, you're trying to develop a lot of trust in your team, and so you ask questions like, what did the person beside you do well in practice? You might have a question, what's your favorite food? Who's your favorite rap singer? Those kind of things are all just to let the kids know each other, that they build some trust there between players and coaches. And then as you get more comfortable with that circle after a couple of weeks, I think then you look at some really kind of tough questions that you ask. One of the best questions that we ever ask with our team, high school and our national team, is say one thing that nobody would know about you. And again, you'd address it to, for that day, it might be going to your left today. And I would say you mix up your circle. You're not always telling the same player the same thing. We always say use your leadership voice. Say it loud enough so everybody in the circle can hear what you say. That's really important. And then everybody is listening. Nobody is talking, or nobody is saying anything else while that's going on. So that's a great example of building some trust. I mean, we've had anything from on that question to my dad passed away when I was 5 years old. My mom's in jail for drug use, or my uncle was my coach growing up, and he's a guy I look to a lot. Just some really kind of heavy things that players will give out with that question. And we find out that's the kind of question that brings in complete trust with the players to each other. Now you carry that on the court, they'll trust, they'll make the extra pass because of the trust factor. They're in help defensive position better because of the trust factor. So we really think that's an important part of this communication circle as well.
So you know this. I don't know if our listeners do, but I used to coach back a long time ago, and so I'm taking notes. And so if I was to take the communication circle and sort of try to tie it back into the 4 C's, what I took out of it, obviously our listeners could take what they want out of it, but going back to the communicate, comfort zones, choices, and competition sort of lessons that we're trying to impart here, circles encourage players to express themselves, so that sort of builds those communication habits that we were talking about. Going into comfort zones, based on what you said, the consistency and the predictability of circles creates those sort of safe spaces for young people, so they can go outside their comfort zone. Connecting it to choices, my takeaway was that circles provide that sort of built-in opportunity for players to reflect and talk about their choices, both the good and the bad, obviously. Some of them are their choices, some of them are their life circumstances, obviously, too. But how they react to those life circumstances is on them and is their choice. And then competition. I think investing in the player's voice shows that players matter. And when they matter, they're more confident to take those risks, obviously, and compete. So I like that first action. I don't. I think it might be my favorite, but let's actually take a look at action number 2. Again, we're trying to tie these back to the 4 C's. We've had a couple of speakers at our different coach academies, and I know Jay Billis, the analyst and broadcaster from ESPN, is one of them that talks about catching players doing something well or good. So action 2 is catching our players doing something good. What do we mean by this? What does this look like?
Well, I think first of all, you recognize correct behavior. I know as when you're coaching 8 or 9-year-olds or even high school players, at times you have behavior that is maybe not conducive to the whole group learning and paying attention. And sometimes you just ignore that behavior. But when somebody is doing the behavior that you really like as a coach, then you would call that out. For instance, if you would say, "Hey, Billy, you would stop play and say, hey, Billy, you did a great job of showing leadership by being in line and getting your teammates in line." So you would model that behavior. You would have Billy has modeled that behavior, so everybody can see this is the kind of behavior that you actually want as a coach. And for a lot of reasons, I think that's good, because now you're getting the whole team to see what you want as a coach, and they're buying into that, as opposed to just calling out negative behavior all the time. It's important for the players to see, well, what behavior do you want me to do? And obviously, you're into, as a coach, you're into change of behavior at times as well.
Building on that a little bit, I mentioned that I coach. Obviously, you coach far higher levels and longer than I did, but did you ever have a time in your life, I know I did, where I really focused on I'll say the negative, but sort of on the behavior correction element more than I did on what they were doing well? Obviously, if I did my job as a coach, my players were doing something well. I'm sure yours were too, but I always used to focus, I remember this distinctly, on the things they weren't doing so well. When did it change for you? Like, when did that, first of all, I guess, did you ever focus on the negative? And then secondly, obviously it did change for you, but when did that happen?
Yeah, I think naturally, just as a coach, we focus on things that are maybe a negative behavior or things that we want to correct. And so we get in that mode where we're always looking for, hey, this has to be corrected, or this is a negative behavior, as opposed to, hey, let's really pick out some positive things that are going on our team and make a point to point that out to your team. So I think as a coach, when we have to consciously really think about pointing out positive things. And I've always said, there should be 4 positive things said for every negative thing. And to me, the longer I coached, that was something that I felt really brought about a change in behavior. When I constantly pointed out positive things that happened to players on our team, and then everybody else kind of fell in line because they want that feedback as well. They want that positive feedback, and what it does too is establish roles on your team for each player. If you constantly praise a player for rebounding, that establishes his role without telling, hey, this is your role. So those all go into the fact that calling out players for something they're doing correctly is probably a coaching aspect that is overlooked, and that should be used more often than it actually is.
And you use rebounding as an example, but I do think it's very important to be specific about what it is that you're sort of calling out, and authentic, like we mentioned. Don't just say good job, but explain exactly what it is you liked about something and why you liked it. Rebounding being a prime example, but it could be, I suppose, anything. And the other thing is focusing on progress, not necessarily performance. Can you maybe speak to that? Because, I mean, our listeners are dealing with players at all different levels, but even at the highest levels of the teams that you've coached, I'm sure progress was really important for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Even with our elite team, with our junior national team, sometimes they're so physically gifted that the skill level is not caught up to their being so physically gifted. But I would say what has really helped with players is to see where they've been and now where they are now. For instance, I would call out a player and say, if we're working on our offense, and I would say, I would stop the play and say, Jimmy, 2 weeks ago you could not go to your left, and now look at what you're doing. You're going to your left and starting the offense and making that pass, dribbling with your left hand. So you made a lot of progress in that aspect. And I think when players really focus and know that they're improving, he may not have even thought about it. Know that they're improving. I think this makes a big statement for your whole team, is that the improvement takes place over a period of time, and that as a coach, I'm noticing the improvement, and that makes the players, I think, feel really good about where they were at one time and where they're at now.
It really comes back to building habits too, like integrating goals and things like that into the team. I know I specifically used to have a problem with certain players where it wasn't very easy to catch them doing something right or doing something well. And I had to literally look for things and set some sort of goals, because their goals might be different. And I know, and we try not to name names here, but just as an example, you've coached everyone from the Bradley Beals and the Andre Drummonds of the world to the Jason Tatums and Harry Giles and folks like that. But like, maybe it's easier to catch them doing something well. But I also know that you've coached some players who you really need to take them from point A to point B, and their point B might be totally different than Jason Tatum's point B. So having some goals set based on the player, in my opinion, has been very helpful. But moving on a little bit, just to kind of get into our other actionable items here. Action 3 is what we call coaching in questions and sound bites. And again, we're trying to tie this all back to the 4 C's of development in the players. So while we might like to talk as coaches, it might not be really helping out the player in terms of their own personal development, which really, at the end of the day, wins and losses are important, but that's really what we are doing as a coach as well. So what do we mean by coaching in questions and specifically coaching in sound bites?
Well, I think this is part of growing as a coach as well. First of all, I always say coach in sound bites, not paragraphs. So if you coach in paragraphs, you're giving a 5-minute expose on maybe a drill or a skill, and the attention span certainly is not that long with that age group. So instead of over-explaining it, what you would do is you would focus on one specific part of that drill or that skill, and then let players kind of experiment with it, figure things out. One of my favorite sayings is, well, you know what, you figured out as a player. I think that gives them some ownership in what's going on as well, with not only their progress, but gives them some ownership being a part of the team and becoming better for the team itself. So I think when you're really helping players, a lot of it comes from trying to have them be the focal point for themselves. Hey, what can I do? How am I going to figure it out? And there's certain drills, obviously, that will help them do that, and that I'll get into here in a bit.
It's not easy to do. I know that as a coach, and I know you know that too. And it takes a little bit of a transition to be able to do that, because I think a lot of times, as long as we feel like we got everything out, we feel like we did our quote unquote jobs. But really, any teacher or coach, your job's not done unless the student really has taken on what you've taught them. So I know what it is, I know why we do it, but maybe give some examples about how to do it. I know you gave a ratio example, 4-to-1, basically 4 positive things for every one sort of piece of instruction, I'll say. But what are some other things coaches can do to sort of coaching questions and sound bites?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think as a coach, maybe during a game, when you take a player out of a game, I think it's very, first of all, you need to communicate with that player. Not necessarily why you took him out, but all right, maybe ask him, what did you think about that last play, or how could you make that last play better? What happened from your aspect on the court, without being critical right away and telling him what you saw. Let him explain to you what he saw, because I think there's a communication gap there a lot of times with players. Same way in practice. I think we say to a player, all right, how do you feel comfortable getting over that screen? So you're asking them a question. What that does, that engages them. They're not just being a rote learner. They're not just doing it because you said to do it. They're thinking about, well, what is the best way to get over the screen? Or maybe I can't get over the screen, and I'm going to tell you that. So I think that's part of really teaching them how to play the game and making them feel a part of their own, like I said before, their own improvement. A lot of times I will ask, hey, what do you think? Maybe a player asks me, well, I can't get over this screen. And I would say, what do you think? How would you defend that screen then? So those are ways that you can ask players that the thought process is there, and they're thinking about how they can adjust, how they can make themselves a better player. And then also it's just allowing them to figure it out. I often say on the court, what you figure it out. We do this a lot of ways by playing 3-on-3 in practice situations. We always say, when you play 3-on-3, the court's much more open, but it allows the players to really figure out how to play. They have to figure out both offensively and defensively how to get the ball movement, and it's just a much easier way to teach different skills, and enhances the skill development in a 3-on-3 method, as always playing a 5-on-5 method or just working on straight skill. So again, the questions, coaching questions and sound bites is extremely important in developing your individual player and in the individual team.
And what would you say to obviously we talked about your experience coaching elite level players. What would you explain to the coach out there that's coaching an 8-year-old team, and they're thinking, great, Coach Show, that sounds really great for the players you're coaching at that level, but just coaching in sound bites or letting them quote unquote figure it out work for, let's say, the 8-year-old, the coach of an 8-year-old team? And do you have any examples that you can give, maybe that it does in fact work at that level too?
Yeah, actually, when you coach the youth level, first of all, they're there to play. They're there to love the game. So as coaching a youth team, you would like to have them figure it out. And again, a 3-on-3 is a great way to do that with even youth players, where they could kind of play, figure out the spacing, figure out where they should go, where they shouldn't go, as well. And then overextending your description of a skill or how to do it. First of all, their attention span is not going to allow that. But give them one thing. For instance, when you're working on dribbling, you would say, keep that elbow close to your body, get that wrist going up and down to dribble the basketball, and then do the reps. So you have short sound bites to describe that skill, to teach that skill, and then you go to the reps. Then you might make it, all right, now we're going to advance to a little lower dribble. So now you bend your knees and keep that dribble below the knees. So you're progressing with that, but you're giving short sound bites to those skill levels without trying to give the whole skill all at once, which most young players don't understand anyway.
Ray, my favorite example you gave was, I think it was your grandson's team where you were watching a practice, and they might have been 3-on-3 even. They were playing, and he, I think, had cut back door on a particular play and scored a layup. And I think after practice, you had told me, you had asked him, Landon, how did you know to cut back door to get open? He said, well, I just figured that if the player played me too tight this way, I can just go to where the open space is, and it would be easy. And that's one of the favorite things that I remember. But really, while that seems so simple, it really does, I think, translate to all levels. Yeah,
it certainly does, Jay. We even do that with our elite team. With our junior national team, where they may be playing the 3-on-3 game, and then they're having to figure out, cutting and spacing. But that's a great example, because now when they're figuring out, then they remember that much more. It's not like a coach told them to do that, but hey, they figured it out. Gives them confidence in trying new things. I think that's really important as well. So those are really critical moments for a player to make huge advances in their game when they can just figure it out on their own. Because that backdoor cut that 8-year-old made to get open, I mean, he doesn't even know what a backdoor cut is, but he just said, if I can't catch the ball here, I'm just going to cut to the basket. He got the pass, and that's something that will stick with him and his teammates for the length of his basketball playing years, because he figured it out.
Right, and then it's not so robotic, but it's more intuitive. And then just kind of wrapping up our third action item, which again, for our listeners and the coaches out there, we call it coaching in questions and sound bites. Trying to apply it back to those 4 C's. Asking questions, for example, shows that the coach is really invested in what the player has to say and encourages their voice. So obviously they're going to communicate more, which is the first C. The second C, which is the comfort zone. When players sort of know their voice matters, they're going to be more comfortable going outside that comfort zone. And then as far as choices go, it sounds like if you can coach in questions and sound bites, and the players answering questions provides them some practice at thinking through the possible outcomes of their choices. So they're naturally going to get better at making decisions anyway. And then sort of that layering question approach that you had mentioned earlier helps drive learning and confidence. And like we were just talking about with the example of the backdoor cut, that confidence is going to be needed at some point to perform under pressure, because obviously for those of you out there that are coaching, you can sit in a practice and blow the whistle and stop the play and get them to do exactly what you're looking them to do. But to get them to perform it under a competition environment is an entirely different skill set. And so we think coaching in questions and sound bites is transferable to the 4 C's, which in turn is transferable to the player's ability to grow on the court, but then also, like we mentioned, off the court. Okay, so in our last actionable item here anyway, and how it applies to the 4 C's, we talk about critical moments, and basically coaching in those critical moments and allowing players to try and explaining to them why. And so what do we mean by that in coaching in critical moments?
Well, you hope that your players will try. They're the ones that are actually playing the game, so you want to give them some freedom to try things that are going to make your team better and for them to get better. So again, a lot of times my saying goes, figure it out is exactly how that goes, the try and why deal. So if I continue to say figure it out, they're going to have confidence thinking that, hey, I'm going to try, I'm going to work, I'm going to really see if this works out for me on the court, and they're going to be more apt to first of all, they're going to be more apt to become a better player, because it's kind of by trial and error a little bit. And if they feel confident that the coach is going to allow that to happen, why, I think they make great strides in how they are. And remember, we want players to get better, and that's what we're working toward. Especially after they figure out at a young age they want to become a good player, and then they're working on how to become a good player. And this is the try and why method really enforces the fact that they can become a better player by trying different things on the court.
Which is great, because if you celebrate trying, which is not easy to do, as you know, as a coach, it involves some letting go. But it encourages a healthy relationship with risk taking, obviously speaking in basketball terms, which is a great way to learn. If the takeaway is right, in addition to providing some feedback to players on what to do and how to do it, if you share the why you're doing it, it seems like you're going to have a nice foundation for a player to grow upon. Ultimately, I think we all want players to feel good about their actions, their decisions, and then obviously you've mentioned this now at length, but promote that sort of deeper understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And hopefully that helps prevent younger people who are particularly vulnerable to taking the coach's instructions personally, which I know at all levels permeates the game. And it's not a personal thing, but more of a foundational element of why we're doing this particular drill, or why in some cases have to do it over and over again. So moving on and kind of wrapping up with that fourth action, which is, again, to everybody out there, we're calling it a critical coaching moment. And I think what we're talking about too here, Coach, is like, this is important, right, for it to translate to things where situations that you don't control as a coach, games, substitutions in the heat of the moment, after a player makes a mistake at a really important moment. Is that kind of what we're talking about here too?
Absolutely. I think, you're a coach has to be really careful in some ways about how they react in critical moments. I think you can certainly give a player confidence in critical moments by what you say and how you say things. So if you're talking about critical moments during a game, or especially after a player makes a mistake, they know they've made the mistake. Let's not dwell on that mistake as a coach, but let's say, all right, what could you have done better? What will you do better next time? And by one of my things is, mistakes are part of the game, and it's how you react to those mistakes that are going to improve you as a player. So I think if players know that, and players really don't want to make mistakes. I mean, they're trying to do the best they can. They're trying to please you as a coach, and I think they just want some feedback as to, all right, if I try this, it's going to be okay. Or if I do something that during a practice or during a game that will help my skill level or help our team do better, is it okay if I do this? It gives them confidence to step out of the box, so to speak, that sometimes coaches put players in. And we want players to play freely. We want them to be not be a robot, not be overthinking the game. We want them to be out there playing. So as a coach, if you are always on, like we said before, if you're always critical, they don't quite get that aspect of it. But if you come through with the aspect of, hey, you know what, making a mistake is okay, but let's learn from that. And let's not make that same mistake again. I think it's real crucial for the players.
So sort of like creating a mistake ritual, if you will, finding a way to help your players let go of those mistakes, because they are a critical part of learning, and they're going to happen whether you try to micromanage it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And some players, I think, coaches may not like it, but some players will say or tell a player, "My bad," if they make a mistake. Well, that's one mechanism. I think that's a mechanism that players use to kind of get rid of that mistake as well. So, those are kind of mechanisms that are good, and it can be, it can be anything. A player makes a mistake, he can, make a thumbs down or whatever that he gives to his teammates. I think what that does is all right, that's a mistake, but now it's over with. So you forget about it, you lose it, and I think that it helps you progress to the next play more quickly.
Exactly. Well, that's well said. I think, trying to tie these back to the 4 C's, which again is ultimately a part of the player's growth. If those critical coaching moments, if you will, and how it ties back to better communication in your players, is that by engaging with the player during those critical moments helps them practice communicating, and then focusing on the try and why helps those players to be sort of less defensive in those moments. But also it gets them out of their comfort zone, because knowing that a coach supports them in trying new things allows the players the freedom to try new things. Really, the third thing is that when players take more risks because they know that their coach is going to support that try, it helps players develop a deeper understanding of the game, encourages better choices, encourages them to make better choices. And then finally, trying new things when it counts is how we improve the try and why, to create an environment that supports the players in doing that. But in turn, a byproduct of that is that you're also probably going to win more games, because obviously if they feel more confident in making those trial and error type of mistakes, or feeling supported through those mistake rituals, it's going to help you as a coach in competition, right? Because obviously that's going to translate for you, if not in the first game, certainly by by the time playoffs roll around.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, there's really a lot that goes into the game of basketball. And when you take a look at the 4 C's that we talk about, communication, comfort zone, choices, and competing, you're taking those 4 C's, and it's really a basis for really everything you can do on the court and off the court. The communication is comes out with the try and the why. When you ask players questions, that's all part of the communication, develops confidence. You want players out of their comfort zone a little bit in order to try new things. And of course, the choices on the court and off the court are important. And then the competing, how the players compete. So you put all those 4 things together, I think over time, the skills develop at a rapid rate, your team develops rapidly, and you just have a better a group of players that understand the game better.
Well, Coach, that's great. I think, we gave 4 behaviors. There obviously could be a lot more. But the goal is to try to give these coaches that are listening some authentic ways to impart those 4 C's. So, I want to thank you for that. Again, I'm sure you and I could go probably 3 hours just on this topic alone. So it's kind of tough to chop everything up into a digestible form. But to give a little bit of a preview of next week, which would be our 4th episode in this series, our 4th and final episode in this particular series anyway, we're going to dive into the on-court component of USA basketball player development as it relates to our 4 levels. And we define those 4 levels, we call those 4 levels: introductory, then foundational, advanced, and the performance level, which is up at the pro and Olympic levels of play. So we're going to discuss each level next week, and what planning for a season, an individual practice, and then an individual game should look like at each of those levels. So, Coach, I just wanted to thank you again for joining me. I think it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next week, and I think we gave a lot of coaches today listening to this. I think we gave them some really practical things that they can look at and see if it applies to their team. and very usable things. So that's what we're here for, and I appreciate our listeners listening into it.
Me too, Coach. And thank you, everybody out there, for joining us again. This is the Youth and Sport podcast for USA Basketball. I'm Jay Demings. I am the Youth and Sport Director. I was joined by Don Showalter, who is the Coach Development Director, and just so happens to be a 10-time gold medal winning coach. But if you have any questions or ideas or anything that we can help you with at USA Basketball, just email us at youth, that's YOUTH, at usabasketball.com. And we are looking forward to seeing everybody next week. So take care.